the Prime Minister's due to announce today that every neighbourhood will have a named and contactable police officer as part of the Prime Minister's mission to tackle crime. So we're joined by the Home Secretary, who's in charge of our police, Yvette Cooper. Very good morning to you, Yvette Cooper.
Good morning, Susanna.
Two particular issues raised this morning already. Firstly, if you are burgled, will that mean that you'll have a local bobby walking up and down your street who, A, might put off the burglars, or B, might be someone you can call and if you can guarantee they'll come round? And also, if you're running a shop and you're the victim of persistent shoplifting, is that what this could tackle? Could you guarantee that?
So the first thing is, this is not an alternative to 999 services. Of course, you need emergency policing response in the normal way. But what this is about is getting neighbourhood policing back. The local officers and PCSOs, the community support officers, who know the community and who actually are somebody you can contact if you've got that kind of persistent shoplifting. So the second case you talked about, if for a local business, they're seeing the same problems time and again, yeah, absolutely. You want them to have a named neighbourhood officer that they can get in touch with, can say, here's who we think's doing it, or we've got the CCTV, or we've got these problems, it's always happening in the afternoon. That is exactly the kind of thing that we need local police working in communities with local businesses, particularly in town centres, where we have seen soaring shoplifting, soaring street theft over the last few years, and yet the number of neighbourhood police just being cut from our town centres. We need to put those neighbourhood officers back.
One of the other issues that we've been discussing this morning is that there is a perception, and you would know because you're the person in charge, there is a perception that even though we have hard-pressed police officers, they're spending too much time on online crime. Some people don't think it's actually worth police time to be policing what people say online, and not enough time investigating burglaries and shoplifting. Would they be right in that perception? Is that something you've had discussions with police about?
Well, I've been clear, the government's been clear, that we see the neighbourhood policing really as the priority. That does mean those town centre crimes, those really practical crimes, the street theft and so on, that make a difference to whether people feel safe in the community, in the town centres. It's why we're saying these 13,000 additional officers and PCSOs is the major priority in the plan for change that the Prime Minister is setting out today. We've also talked about, though, the importance of things like reducing violence against women and girls, where we've had a lot of discussions about things like stalking or spiking. Now, some of that stalking, that can involve online threats, that can involve the online intimidation and so on as well. So, of course, police have to keep up with the way in which crime changes, but we want to see that neighbourhood policing and also halving the most serious violence, knife crime, violence against women and girls. Those are the priorities that we're saying for policing, because we think those are the priorities for communities across the country where often people feel things have gone backwards.
Another issue which is part of your brief is not one of Keir Starmer's new reset pledges. He's making a pledge on NHS waiting lists, on house building, on education, on crime, on net zero. He's not making a pledge on immigration, but we saw that the immigration numbers to June 2023 reached almost 1 million. Why are you not making a pledge or setting a target for the amount of immigration we can sustain?
So immigration is actually included in the plan for change that the Prime Minister is setting out later today, because it's really one of the foundation issues, along with, so I'll explain, because it's an important point, and I agree with you, Susanna. So it's setting out, because it's one of the foundations really, national security, border security, these are the underpinning things on which you then have set out the missions, the priorities on things like policing and the NHS. So on immigration, we are making clear that that both legal migration and illegal migration need to be brought down. On the legal migration figures that we saw quadruple in the space of just 4 years, and that's why we're determined that net migration has to come down. That means proper visa controls, but it also means tackling the issues where training in the UK has been cut, and that's why we've seen this massive increase in overseas recruitment. That is not the right approach to our economy as well as to our immigration system. So we do need net migration to come down, and we're going to set out a white paper next year that sets out more of these details.
How many, I mean, what is the number in terms of legal migration? How many migrants do we need to sustain the UK?
Well, I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because we have already, we do look clear, let's be clear, net migration needs to come down, but I think you have to also say, why are we not training people in the UK instead of having all this overseas recruitment? We've always had people who've come to work in our NHS or come to set up businesses. That will always be important. That's the kind of country we are. But you can't have this up to 1 million people, the net migration, whilst overseas recruitment quadruples at the same time as we've seen apprenticeships being cut. Big reduction in the number of apprenticeships, big reduction in the number of adults in training.
Do you have any idea?
So that's why we need to flip that round.
How many in terms of numbers of migrants we need? I mean, it's all very well to have a sort of general, we need to bring it down, but bring it down to what?
Well, you have to have the training and the support. What we're not going to do is what the previous Conservative governments did, where they just pick figures out of thin air and then they do the opposite, because I don't think that has credibility. What we want to do is increase training in the UK, also make sure that we are then using stronger visa controls alongside that to bring net migration down. But bear in mind, of course, we will also always want to have international students because they bring investment into the country, and that's really important. But we shouldn't be having this massive increase in overseas recruitment at the same time as we've got actually record numbers of UK residents who are not in education or training or work, and who are, stuck on long-term benefits instead, when actually with the right support they could be in work as well. Sorry, Susanna.
Just before we let you go, I'm sure you've seen this new Ipsos poll. Says that the public is disappointed with the Labour government's performance. The survey says there's a picture of growing concern about your ability to deliver on key promises. Just over half of Britons say they're disappointed. It's one of the reasons, I'm sure, why Sir Keir Starmer has this reset. People getting in touch with us this morning saying they're concerned, they don't even believe you. You said there was going to be no new tax. We've seen a new tax on employers. You never said you're going to take away the winter fuel allowance. We've seen that taken away from pensioners who aren't on pension credit. And of course, farmers feel hit by the inheritance tax. How are you going to reassure people that they can trust this government?
Well, you're right that we have had to take some difficult decisions since the election, and that is about fixing the foundations. We did inherit the £22 billion black hole in the public finances. We've also had much more of a mess than I had really realised in the asylum and immigration system when we actually then look at the details of what we've inherited. There is a lot of stuff that we're having to then fix, having to turn around, and that does make for difficult decisions. But one of the reasons that the Prime Minister is setting out this plan for change today is to set out, look, these are the real milestones. These are the things we can make a really big difference on over the next few years. Ambitious, but achievable. Getting the neighbourhood police back onto the streets, cutting the waiting lists and waiting times in our NHS. The real practical things that are what give people security, because I think at the moment people feel like, I'm not confident the police will come if I need them. I'm not confident the NHS will be there if I need them. I'm worried about my security, and therefore that is what we want to rebuild people's sense of security and their opportunities for the future. I really understand why people feel frustrated after the last few years, but that's why we want to rebuild the confidence around these practical things that we can deliver.
Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary, thank you very much indeed.